Hey, everybody, and welcome to Career Expert Roundtable. I am Bill, the company's expert, and as always, with me is Abby from Life Work Balance. How you doing, Abby?
Doing well. How are you, Bill?
I'm doing great. This is the bi-weekly live stream that we do where we answer your questions. So if you're watching this on my channel or you're watching it on Abby's channel, send us your comments, send us your questions, send us what's up with you, what you're struggling with, what you're wondering about, and we will do our best to help you out. That's the whole point of this. Abby is a professional recruiter. I am a professional hiring manager. So between the two of us, we should be able to give you some differing perspectives sometimes, but some help on what you're wondering about. And of course, the title of this is How to Get Hired in 2025.
Yep.
So anything to do with job interviews, resumes, the application process, networking, negotiating job offers, all that stuff. That's all good. Anything to do with employment and careers, basically. It's all fair game. And so send us your questions.
Yep.
So
I'm streaming from my YouTube channel as well as my Twitch channel. And so we've got the comments up. We're looking for any questions that you might have about, like Bill said, your job search, your upcoming interviews, whatever that might look like for you. I think the place where I want to start when it comes to this whole process is that job interviews are deceiving because it's not really about you, the interviewee or the candidate. It's about the interviewer and what they're looking for. And
absolutely.
you have to really like showcase your personality and like sell yourself, which is really hard and challenging for most people to do. So, Bill, I know that you have some opinions on this. So tell me a little bit about what you think sets a superstar interviewer apart from someone that you can't even remember the next day.
Well, yeah, great topic to start with, by the way. You have the background in psychology. So the thing that leaps to mind for me is the spotlight effect, right? The spotlight effect, like the idea that, how does it go? Like we're interested in ourselves, but not everyone else is as interested in us as we are in ourselves, that kind of thing, right? It's
Yes.
not probably not a great explanation of it, but realizing that the job interview isn't in a weird way. It's like it's not all about you. You know, the employer is the one who's interviewing. You're not interviewing the employer. That's not what's actually going on. Like, okay, you can maybe look at it like that, like we're interviewing each other in a way, but yet in reality, they're the ones that called you down for an interview. You responded to their call to action, their job posting, right? And they're talking to several people, right, back to back, several candidates. So it's nice to go down there and talk all about yourself. This is what I can bring. This is what I've done. This is what I know. But really, the perspective of the employer is that they are very much they care about what they are looking for and not much else. You know what I mean? Like not much beyond that. I
Yeah.
mean,
Well, and I think when it comes to like interviewing, we start to think like, what do I need to do to show off my most proud accomplishments on my resume? And what do I need to say about myself in this interview? But we really have to put ourselves in the shoes of the interviewer to really understand why they have this need to fill this position and how we best fit into that. And so it's not about talking about me and how I'm the best fit for this job. It's
there's a
about
line from the Matrix: "Me, me, me." That's what. Yeah, it's not about you.
no. And that's what's so hard for people to get across, like, or get in their minds when it comes to the interview and the job search process, is that everything is actually about the person who's reading your application and the person who's doing the interviews. And that's so hard psychologically to kind of get over that hump. Like, how do you even talk about yourself in the other person's mindset? How do you think about what really matters to them when it comes to the interview process? And how do you write your resume for someone else? And so that's, I think, the biggest hurdle for a lot of people who are in the job search process and why it can take so long, because eventually they figure that out. But initially, they're doing what feels good to them as a candidate rather than what might feel good to the interviewer or the hiring manager. I can't hear you anymore, Bill.
Can't
Oh, there we
remember.
go.
Okay.
Yes.
I didn't do anything, and then my sound went out. So that always gives you confidence. But no, I was saying have you ever had someone come to your door to try and like knock on your door to try and sell you something, and you open the door and they start talking all about themselves, like this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm trying to do and this is what I have and this is what, you know, and it's like, you know, they're telling you all this stuff, and I mean, do you care? Do you, in the majority of these cases? No, you don't. And what you may care about is like you have some preconceived notions about this thing they're trying to sell you, even if you are, let's say for the sake of argument that it's something that you would buy. Okay, you have your thoughts about it. You know, as far as this is concerned, about as far as vacuum cleaners are concerned, what do they sell door to door? The only thing I've ever seen
now.
The only thing I ever seem to get is like Jehovah's Witnesses. But I mean, people that are actually selling something, like I don't know what they sell. But yeah, like, okay, vacuum cleaners, whatever. It's like, when it comes to vacuum cleaners, I care about this, this, and this. That's all I care about. You know, I don't care that it's doing this thing for the environment or, you know, or whatever, right? Like the things that they're telling you about, right? So that's kind of like job interviews. The interviewer is like, I got my own thoughts on what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a candidate that has this, 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 and that's it. I really don't give a crap about all these other things that, you know, you might have or you might think, you know, I'm listening for this, this, this. Now, if you're not talking to me about this, this, and this, I really don't care. I'm not hearing anything good that makes me want to pick you, you know?
Yes. Yes. Well, and using your vacuum cleaner example, like there might be a bunch of different things that your vacuum cleaner can do, but if they're not on my list of things that I care about, I'm going to tune you out and move on to the things that I've already done my research on and that I'm looking at to begin with.
Absolutely.
And so the key to being able to figure out what those things are for the employer so that you can then really present yourself in that way is actually given to you in the job posting. It might not be overtly described in the job posting, but if you are applying for an accountant position, working as an accountant generally is the same set of skills, depending on, you know, what type of industry you're in. But the specific hiring manager who wrote the job posting or the specific organization might have something special that they're looking for from an accountant. And so an accountant from one area might not be the best fit for this specific job, even though the skills in general to do the job are the same. So you have to use that job posting to really decipher what is most important for the hiring manager, for the person who's doing the interview, whatever. So
yeah, like if they said like we need an accountant to work in audit or something like that. And for people who aren't accountants, that's like audit is like one area of accounting, one kind of thing you could hire accountants for. You know, so you get a candidate in, the candidate comes down to the job interview, candidate starts talking about like, oh, in my previous job, I got to work very closely with the CFO of my company. And they showed me like all this like strategic finance stuff they were doing and how they were, you know, doing the treasury.
Uh-oh, your mic went out again.
God. Okay.
It's coming back. So I wonder if there's like just a plug that's.
Yeah. This is why you don't cheap out with the cheap cable, I guess.
No Amazon Basics for you.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, anyway. But what's weird is I'm not touching or anything. So can you hear me now? That's fine?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Anyway. No, I just wanted to finish this and we're going to get to the questions, but I was saying like if you had a candidate that came down for that accounting job and they started talking all about how you know, this was a job that's posted, it's to work in audit, but they start saying in my last job I worked very closely with the CFO and they showed me all this stuff about strategic finance and, you know, the treasury function and all this kind of stuff, you know, and you're very proud of this and you think it shows like, you know, wow, I'm really, you're getting a lot of skills here, you know, but you start saying all this in a job interview, the interviewer, all they care about is audit. That's what they posted the job for. All this stuff that you're talking about, you might be proud of it, but they don't care because all they care about is audit. You know what I'm saying? So it actually works against you saying that kind of stuff. So it's all about them, what they want to hear, as opposed to what you necessarily want to say about yourself.
Yes.
Are you sort of already into the questions there?
I'm looking in the chat right now. I do see that we have someone from Twitch. Hi there. I remember you from last week. This person was in the process of applying to Publix, which is like a grocery store chain here in the United States. And their question is it a good thing when you don't get the position you wanted, but they text you this? And then I think it's a copy of the text message. And I would say yes. When it comes to large organizations like Publix, I'm trying to think of other organizations in the United States. It could be like Walmart. It could be like, King Soopers is one of the grocery store chains near me. They have this revolving door of job postings that are always open. So they're always trying to fill. So while you may not have gotten the job that you initially applied for, there are probably 5 to 10 or even more jobs that you are eligible to apply for. So continue to keep your application updated and active, and then you'll stay in their system, and you'll basically be a candidate that they can just look at in their system and say, this person could be a good fit for this job. And they'll reach out to you proactively to schedule interviews and things like that. Now, that doesn't mean that you just keep your application updated and then you don't do anything. It does mean that you update your application so that you are current in the system, and then you still continually proactively look at the job postings that are listed and apply to those as well. Because just kind of sitting back and waiting for the system to do the job for you is a great way to be waiting around for a while to get hired. If you are submitting questions and applications and all of the things, and you're kind of constantly engaging with their website, that will increase your chances of getting a response back.
Makes sense. We have another one here from Fede, however you say, with a continental kind of accent. Says, hey guys, I just popped in to say hi and thank you for your amazing videos. I've been going through interview processes for the past 11 months and inching closer to an offer. Your videos kept me going. Well, right on. Thank you for saying that, Fed. That's
and 11
awesome
months of job searching is a long time. And at the same time, it's also not unheard of. So it sounds like you are getting closer and closer to that offer stage. Some people that I've worked with have like 8 rounds of interviews to go through. So while it is a grueling process.
Yeah, those are fun.
Oh, yeah. And it's totally unnecessary. But, some organizations do that. So even though it's a grueling process, it does sound like it's starting to pay off. And, if you are getting interviews, then your resume is doing the job that it's supposed to do. If you're noticing that you're getting interviews, but you're just not moving forward in the process, then there's something going on with your interview style that should be examined a little bit more closely. So that is something that I offer if you're interested in trying to decipher what could be going on in your interviews to not get you to the next round. I offer interview strategy sessions where we go over that exact question. And then we can, prepare specific.
Yeah, that's a common issue. I get that a lot. People saying like, it's annoying. They're not giving me feedback. Like they said, no, they didn't hire me, but they're not giving me feedback. And, I regularly explain to people, it's like, they're not going to give you feedback. And if they do give you feedback, that's when you really got to watch out, because either it's false or it's trivial. Like it's not the real reason that you were rejected or whatever.
The most common blanket statement for feedback is there were just more qualified candidates.
Yeah. Very safe.
That is the go-to for recruiters and hiring managers. So they don't have to get into any discussion about why you were not selected, why you're not the best fit, because they want to try to avoid some of that conflict. So if you're getting those types of responses, you're probably not going to get anything more than that. But that is the most common that comes across.
Well, my understanding was that a lot of that originated in the U.S. because some, I don't know the story, but it was something along the lines of companies or the the recruiter or whatever working for a larger company, they would say to the candidate, I'm sorry, we didn't choose you. And then the candidate will say, why? And then the recruiter would say, well, it's because, and then they gave the real reason. And then the candidate sued the employer and said, you can't, evaluate
You're discriminating against me. And
yeah. So as the countermeasure for that, it then became, as I understand, company policy for a lot of employers. I don't know if it's everyone, but a lot of them, to say you don't give proper, accurate feedback other than to say this blanket statement or one of these couple of approved answers, and that's it.
Yep.
So you probably won't get feedback as a candidate for why you were rejected. I mean, that's a standard thing. You have to do your own work to be able to work on, to discover what your weak spot might have been and to work on it, right? So there's a couple of things you can do. The sort of poor person's way of doing it, you get friends and family, you do pretend interviews with them, and it's mainly for practice, but as a fringe benefit, maybe you respect their opinion. I don't know. You could ask them, like, what do you think? How am I doing? Is there something I should work on? But if you want to level it up, you go to a professional career coach. Like, that's certainly what Abby is. I don't offer that service, but and you do a pretend job interview with these people, and that's a common thing, right, Abby? You do that with a lot of your clients and stuff, and you give feedback, and you tell people, like, here's my objective kind of opinion of how you're doing and what I'd recommend, what changes I'd recommend you make, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I think that when it comes to, getting feedback, the United States is known for being, what's the word?
Litigious.
Yes. Thank you. We are sue happy. We want to sue everyone for everything, even though it might be our problem and our fault. So knowing that, employers probably are going to be much safer and just rely on their other qualified candidates, which is also true. Like, the most qualified candidate or best qualified candidate for a job isn't just the person who has all of the skills to do the job technically. It goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning. It's like this personality trait. Like, you have to be a good fit for the role, both from a technical standpoint and then also from like a personality standpoint. And that is so subjective to the interviewer and the team that's going through the process and what they need and the culture of the organization that you really can't decipher it. So if they've got some more concrete feedback for you, then take that. Hopefully it's a little bit more specific. Like, oh, well, we were looking for someone who has more specific experience in this area. And while you do have a year of experience here, we're needing someone who can really hit the ground running and has experience with, 5 years in that role. So it is few and far between that you will get that honest feedback from employers. Most of them will just stick to the standard, better qualified candidates.
The other thing is, I just want to say this one thing. The chat has actually been filling up, and I it wasn't moving for me, so I now see that there's a bunch of comments, but we'll get to them in a second. I just want to say this: you've also got to take some feedback with a little bit of a grain of salt, because you see, like, everybody's got an opinion. You interview with one employer, and they say, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're too aggressive, you're too assertive. Mm-hmm. We want more, laid back, calm, passive type candidate," right? So you go, "Oh, geez, I'm too aggressive." So you change your style completely. Meanwhile, it turns out that there was nothing wrong with you in the first place. It was just that employer, they got a weird perspective. They feel threatened by everybody. Mm-hmm. And so, they don't like people that are normal. They want people to be very submissive and demure and, taciturn. You know what I'm saying? So if you follow their advice.
Yeah, the same thing goes with resumes too. If you were to take your resume and give it to 5 different people, you're going to get 5 different opinions on how to improve your resume. So
exactly. It's
like the same thing. Yeah, we've talked about this in past live streams as well. It's a game of chance and luck when it comes to finding the right job with the right organization that's the right fit for you. And you might have to go through a year's worth of applications and interviews to find that right fit, but it's out there. It is out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's go here. I think this is the next one in order here. Okay, Christian says,
"Hey, I recognize your name from past streams. Nice to see you."
Yes, that's right. "I have a job interview next week, public service aid, and treating it like the best interview in my life. I've been watching Abby's videos to help me prepare. I feel that my anxiety might..."
And I don't see any other questions after that. I have a feeling, to just like fill in the blank, it could be anxiety might kind of hold him back from having a successful interview. I have advice on how to handle interview anxiety. Do you have any that comes to mind for you, Bill?
No, go ahead, Abby, for this one.
Yeah. So interview anxiety is totally normal. I'm going to go psychological for a moment. So there was a research study that was done.
On you.
Yes. There was a research study that was done with Olympic athletes. And the researchers asked the Olympic athletes if they were feeling nervous for their upcoming Olympic event. And almost unanimously, every Olympic athlete responded, no, I'm feeling excited. So, from a psychological perspective and physiological perspective, our bodies, our response to feeling excited and nervous or anxious is the exact same feeling in our body. It's just how our brains perceive and interpret that information. So, even though you're feeling nervous and you're feeling anxious about this upcoming interview, you could reframe it in your mind that you're actually feeling excited towards it and your body is helping you prepare for this upcoming event. So, you actually, by having these types of responses, your body is preparing you to be successful. Some of the other things that you can do is practice some deep breathing techniques. I don't know if you've ever heard of box breathing. I'll find a YouTube video. I'll put it in the chat for everyone to refer to if you're interested. But box breathing is a great way to calm your nerves and your anxiety and kind of reset your system before you go into a stressful situation. And then personally, one of my favorite things to use live in an interview is a pressure point technique in your hand. And everyone can do it right now. If you just squeeze this little muscle part of your hand, it can be in your lap and no one will see you squeezing your hand if you're feeling nervous. And that's a great way to just refocus and recenter yourself when you are feeling nervous. Yeah, so Christian's just said in the chat, I know about the hand pinching thing from one of my videos. You can do it in either hand. It's the pressure point that's there for both hands. So whatever is most comfortable for you.
Christian, just stick your hands under the table and then just go like that. Really, like really deep and long. Yeah, there you go. That's right. First impressions. That's what it's all about.
But along those same lines, the other thing to do is just prepare. So when you review the job posting, if you use ChatGPT or Grok, you can prepare some other interview questions to practice, review your stories that you're planning on sharing during the interview, and know as you're going into this that you've done everything in your power to prepare and be successful in this interview, and that you will be ready to respond to whatever they throw at you. If you feel blindsided, if you feel like you're going to black out and you don't remember what to say, take a deep breath and reset. It's okay to ask them to repeat the question. It's okay to rephrase the question to them so in a way that maybe makes more sense to you. But ultimately, you got this. You can do this.
Grab a friend or family member, Christian. Do some pretend job interviews with them. Mm-hmm. Just practice makes perfect, and then you will. Let's be honest, you will kick ass. That's just what's going to happen. You do like 40, like three or four times a day for like 2 weeks. I mean, I know you've got something coming up, but just in general, if you want to get good at interviewing, 3 or 4 times a day, pretend interviews with a friend or family member, over 10 days, that's Monday to Friday for 2 weeks. That's like 30 to 40 interviews, Yeah. So when you've done a pretend job interview 40 times and then you go to a real one, you're gonna knock it out of the park. You've heard all the questions, you know them backwards and forth. You've made every kind of rookie mistake answering questions. You know what I mean? You're going to be on your A game. So that's something to do if you want to go an extra step further. And if you've done that and you want to take it to the next level, do like maybe one session with a career coach. And then it's pretty guaranteed that you're doing okay in interviews. You know what I mean? Yep. That's not going to be the issue for you going forward.
Yep. The next comment is from Femi, I think Femi Williams. Okay. And they said, hi, Bill. Hi, Abby. I'm grateful for you both for your insights. After 3 months without work and much fine-tuned effort, I finally received a conditional offer today. Thank you both for your help. And then their next comment, which is 2 down for us, says, I'm waiting here to hear back from another company. Although I've accepted a conditional offer with company A, would it be wrong to decline it later on if I receive another offer from company B?
Absolutely not. You do what's in your own best interest, Femi Williams. If you get an offer for one company, but you're secretly hoping for an offer from another more desirable company, take the first one. Hey, what's the worst that could happen? The second one offers you a job. That's a problem people look forward to. You know what I mean? And in that case, hey, if the second company B offers you a job and you want to take it, just tell company A, I'm very sorry. Something has come up. Unfortunately, I won't be able to be helpful to you on this. And so unfortunately, I can't accept this. And you know what I mean? You do what's right for you. That's what organizations do. They act in
And you
their
may even be able to use it as a bargaining or negotiation chip. Let's say that company A is similar to company B, but company B's offer is better, but you
absolutely.
actually want to work with company A more. Then you could go to company A and say, I so appreciate your offer. I was actually offered another job with this organization. They're offering me this. I want to work for your organization. Do you think you could match or, go over, by $5,000 or whatever the salary option is to keep me with company A, and kind of use that as a negotiation chip? If they say no, then you can go with company B, which is the better offer than company A originally gave you, but they could say yes. So then you could get a win-win where you get higher offer than what they originally offered you and work for the company that you feel more connected to.
Yeah, getting overlapping job offers is not like a problem. It's what people shoot for. It's a good thing because, like what Abby says, you have more options now. Now you don't have to take any crap from anybody. You got two companies. If one is not to your liking, you take the other one. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's a good thing. Now you got to be smart about it, okay? Because just something to keep in mind is that if company A says, well, can you give me the details of the offer you've received from company B? What employer? Who are you dealing with at the company? What specifically are they offering you? You don't disclose any of that. That's none of their business. And it has been known that employers have sabotaged offers for candidates. So they'll call up company A, will call up company B and say, oh, I just think it's only fair that you realize that this candidate, we've been dealing with them for a while and they drink on the job and, they're a terrible person and, you really want to reconsider
Yep.
entering. I couldn't in all good conscience not inform you of this, something like that. And they can get stuff rescinded, so having two offers is great. Do what's right for you. Don't worry about these people at all. It's just business, and be smart about it. Don't disclose details to a third party of any offer you get.
And while I 100% agree with that, it's also somewhat opposite of the advice we were giving earlier about the interviewing and job application process, because ultimately at the heart of the job search, it is about you, the candidate, and what is best for you, what you need to survive and thrive in your world. However, it's also, when you're applying, it's about tailoring it to the employer and making them feel good and believe that you're all about them, even though you're all about you. So we've got these like two competing themes that are both true. So at the core, we've got you as the candidate. The most important thing to you is you. You've got to do what's best for you. And you've also got to kind of put on this front to each employer and each job that you apply to that it's all about them.
Yeah, if you are trying to persuade someone, it's all about them.
Mm-hmm.
If you are considering, like what your next move is, it's all about you. So yeah, but you have to be able to recognize the different situations. Absolutely.
And Femi just put in the very most recent chat, thanks for the advice. I agree that I have to put myself first. Company B, which is Rolls-Royce, is my dream work. So I would not have any regret declining company A. Good.
Awesome.
Shoot for that dream job.
Did we skip a bunch of things? Like there's this name I can't pronounce it, like alphanumeric kind of thing.
And so that person, we kind of talked about them at first. They were from Twitch last week as well.
Okay, so we did that.
To reiterate what we were talking about with them is, when it comes to applying for jobs, never stop actually applying, even if it's with the same company, just because you don't want to passively rely on the company's website or program to do the applying for you. You'll find that it will take a lot longer for you to get a job if you take a more passive approach. So you want to actively apply, actively throw your name into the hat, actively try to be considered for jobs, which is going to take more effort on your part, but will ultimately make your job search less lengthy than if you were to take a fully passive approach.
Okay, so are we on this one here? Is this the next one?
Christian no.
Again? No, we did that?
We actually haven't touched on that one, which I think is helpful, because I think what Christian is saying is what everyone's worst nightmare is if they're not used to being on camera, which is recording themselves and then watching it back. And that's one of my biggest pieces of advice that most people don't follow when it comes to interview preparation. So I highly recommend, best case scenario, that you practice with another person and you record that interaction. Most people won't record that interaction. They'll just want the feedback from the other person they're interacting with. So then the next best thing is to record yourself on video, answering interview questions, and then watching it back and listening. So you're not only listening for the words that you're actually saying, are you answering the questions? Is it concise? Is it clear? Is it smooth, etc.? But you're also watching your body language. So are you making eye contact with the camera? Are you smiling while you're talking? Are you using like crazy hand gestures that are way too distracting? So there's multiple things that you want to watch and listen for when you record yourself preparing for an interview. And then worst case scenario, but better than not doing it at all, is just recording your voice answering questions. So taking your phone, doing a voice memo, recording yourself answering some interview questions, and then listening back to it. Most people hate the sound of their own voice. They cringe at it. They don't want to hear what it sounds like. But if you don't take the effort to actually listen back to your answers and how you actually sound, you're missing out on some key data that could really help change your interview game.
Yeah, that's always a tough one because nowadays you get companies that try. They're trying to like make this standardized, right? Like where you record a video of yourself and you send it in, and this kind of thing. I think there's a lot of pushback on that, but because a lot of candidates I think just refuse to do that.
I don't like it.
Yeah, I mean,
it might be easier for an organization, but easier does not mean that you're going to catch the high quality applicants.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about that before. It's like I think a lot of people are just not into that. I mean, obviously, it's good for the organization. It's more efficient and blah blah. And you know why it's more efficient? Because like you record yourself answering all these questions. They watch the first couple, they make a decision, and then in a lot of cases they won't be watching the others. So it's like it was all for naught kind of thing. You know what I mean? So it's a little bit. You could argue that it's a little bit more dehumanizing, to do that.
Absolutely. And they might even have an AI platform evaluate all of the videos ahead of time, and it just doesn't capture what type of candidate you actually are because the computer is making a decision about you rather than a human. And so there's a lot of, I think, downsides to using the one-way video interviews as like the first step in the process. Yeah. And most companies would argue that it streamlines the process for them if they get hundreds or thousands of applicants.
If they're gonna put AI into the process, I want them to put AI into a robot, an android, and then I have to go down to the job interview to meet with the robot. That's what I want, because then maybe you could kick its ass if you don't get it. I don't know, but it'll be more interesting rather than this thing on the web.
That's exactly where we are. Peace of mind.
Yeah, here we go. For once, I'm actually right where we need to be in the chat there. Peace of Mind says, I've been looking for work for over a year. I'm starting to think it's maybe because of my age, 61. Do you have any advice on interviews? I'm not quite 61 yet, but listen, if you want to make sure that there's no ageism and you're 61, go to a place where the person interviewing you is 61. You know what I mean? Don't go to a place where the person interviewing you is 21. And, that's one way of handling this. I'm sure Abby might have more sophisticated solutions than I do for this.
Yeah. And this is tough because if your age is a problem to the people who are doing the interviewing, it's probably not overtly a problem. It's probably this like subconscious, unconscious bias that they're just choosing not to move forward with you because of your age. So really the only way to get around it is to describe how you match the qualities without showing that you're overqualified or that your age is going to hold you back. So you want to describe your flexibility, your adaptability, your eagerness to learn, your ability to engage in professional development and take feedback and have a growth mindset. So like all of those things you want to describe during the interview process. And you could blatantly just address the elephant in the room. I know that I am probably one of the older candidates, and here's how I am actually the best fit for this position. And then you can really try to sell yourself that way. That could backfire. It could, really just say this person is not a good fit. They've blatantly addressed why they're too old for this position. But it could also work to your advantage to kind of just name the elephant in the room. But the best piece of advice is it's not going to be a blatant discrimination thing. It's going to be this unconscious bias that you're going to have to work against with the interviewer and convince them unconsciously for them that you are a good fit for this role, regardless of your age. So, the types of roles that you're applying for, if they have lots of technology that you might be using, or if it is a young team, you have to think about how your maturity and your experience really sets you apart from the other candidates they could be interviewing. And that's hard to do, especially in this type of situation where Bill and I don't have a lot of context about what types of jobs you're applying to, what the company looks like, but you'll want to do some research ahead of time. Google the organization, do some research on LinkedIn, see who is associated with the company on LinkedIn and try to gauge their age. Look up the recruiter, look at the interviewers, try to get some information about them and the team that you'd be working with ahead of time so that you feel prepared as you go into whatever interview it is that you're going into next.
And the other thing that I feel I always have to mention in these type of situations is that so far we've been talking about posted jobs, dealing with like formal job interviews with recruiters. Just keep in mind, I mean, there's always networking. The what's actually more popular as a method for people to get a job is networking. One of the things in networking is called direct outreach. That's where you reach out to all the employers that are around you that are likely to employ someone like you. And, normally the way a conventional job interview works is you're talking about yourself. You're saying, like what Abby was saying, you want to anticipate what their objections might be or their concerns might be, and you want to address them proactively and say, well, I do have a lot of energy and I'm proactive on things, and I don't just dismiss things out of hand, and all this kind of stuff. With networking, you get the job because you're the only one that showed up. It really levels the playing field because you're not talking about what you're like and what you do. You're demonstrating what you're like and what you do. You're the one that reached out to them. You were persuasive enough for them to say, hey, come on down, let's talk. We might have something, I don't know.
And if you think about like the experience of meeting someone in person versus looking at a piece of paper describing someone, you're probably more inclined, even as a job candidate, to want to talk to the person that you know in person or who you're meeting in person versus cold calling someone from a piece of paper that may or may not be true. So having that different interaction through networking can certainly change the playing field.
And the thing is, I end up talking about this on my channel on a regular basis because there's so many exceptions to the rule. If you're responding to posted jobs and you're going through this sort of official hiring process, there's a lot of people that don't fit, that they're not ideal for that type of situation. For example, if you're a generalist, if you're someone who has had many jobs and they've been very eclectic, you spent 5 years working as a plumber, and then you did 5 years as a bookkeeper, and then you did 5 minutes, on a construction site, and then you did 5 years on a construction site, then you did another 5 years doing something else. You show up for a job interview or as a response to a posted job, you're not going to be the ideal candidate because you've been working for 20 years, but you've only got a maximum of 5 years experience in whatever it is that you're applied for. You know what I mean? So someone is always going to have more experience than you, despite your age. You know what I mean? People who have work gaps, people who are changing careers, these people don't fit within that standard sort of approach, that formal approach for hiring. Does that mean that these people are unemployable and they can't get jobs? No, it just means that they go through alternative methods to get those jobs, and those alternative methods are basically some version of networking. Either you just happen to know someone or you reach out to people. and it's a great sort of leveler, um, that can overcompensate for something that maybe a recruiter traditionally would not touch you as a candidate. Maybe you're a homemaker, you're coming back into the workforce after 15 years. According to a lot of the theory that at least that some recruiters are being taught in school, that makes you almost worthless. Like your experience is 15 years old.
Yeah.
There's this principle that people are being taught called use it or lose it. Like if the last time you used those skills was 15 years ago, then it's as if you don't have them. Now, I think a lot of us know that that's not necessarily true, but that's how it's going to be perceived. So when you're going in with hundreds of other applicants, you're not going to be in that top tier, and therefore it's going to be harder for you to get interviews. But does that mean that all is lost and you can't get hired? Of course not. It just means you have to go through alternative methods. So the reason why I'm saying this, peace of mind, is because if you're worried about the ageism thing, the whole 61 thing, that may be causing some issues possibly for you, when you're going to a job that requires like a 22-year-old recruiter to interview you or something. But you talk to the 60-year-old hiring manager, and the age thing, number one, it might not be an issue, or number two, it might be an advantage. They feel they can relate to you.
Well, and Peace of Mind added one more comment just at the very bottom saying that they're looking for medical billing and collection jobs. And so when I think of that, as usually like remote work with a lot of technology, the job interviews are probably virtual. Maybe they're in person, but I'm, not being an expert in that specific industry, it seems like the majority of those jobs are virtual or remote. So what you would want to do is really demonstrate how you are tech savvy. And that really starts with the interview process. Have a really clear camera. Make sure that your background is like not distracting and that you don't have a lot going on, that there's no background noise that can be heard. Make sure that you can be heard really clearly. Like some of those very like hardware oriented things can make a big difference. And then you want to demonstrate how you have the ability to learn new systems. And with medical billing and collection, maybe you're going to be making phone calls to people that can be uncomfortable. So you want to focus on conflict resolution and your ability to communicate and rely on your past experiences on how you are an expert communicator compared to people who might be a little bit more fresh in this industry. So thinking about what sets you apart based off of your age and how you can really demonstrate that you're still willing to learn, that you still have the ability to be taught new tricks. There's all these things that you can kind of subtly communicate during the interview process to ensure that you are not being kicked out for age-related reasons.
Absolutely.
I think our next question was DK. And
we did the Fannie Williams thing, right? Okay.
Yep. That was we already talked about that one. So DK says, I have a panel interview next week with Blue Origin. Congratulations. How do I answer why Blue Origin? It's not something that Bill and I can answer for you. It really comes down to like, why do you want to work for Blue Origin? And you have to think a little bit deeper than it would be cool to put on my resume and the money is good. Like beyond those super tangible things, why do you want to work for Blue Origin? Is it because of their innovation? Do you resonate with their mission statement? Or do you want to make the world a better place by making
there's a couple of ways. I mean, it depends what they mean. This is the problem. I hate these like vague interview questions. Okay, so there's two things that leap to mind for me. Number one, this is a version of like the research question to see if you know anything about this company that you've applied to. So this is where you show off the fact that you've done at least 2 minutes of research on the internet, so you know what they do. How long they've been around, what size. Is this a branch office? Is this their main office? Are they a regional thing? Are they international? I mean, just that's where you could show it off. But I think also that this question, it's a variation of why do you want to work here? And that's the answer I would recommend. I mean, there's a number of ways you could answer it. The answer I would recommend is you basically say, well, listen, like why Blue Origin? Well, as I understand it, you're looking for someone who, and then you have this, and then It's like, well, you're looking for someone who has this. Well, I've got that. You're looking for someone who has this. Well, I got that too. You're
Mhm.
looking for someone who has this education. Well, I completed that years ago and I did really well. You're looking for someone with these skills and this personality. Well, yeah, that's me too. So it seems like I'm a really good fit. That's why Blue Origin. That's
Yep.
why I'm here. It seems like, I'd be the perfect fit for this.
And you're essentially describing the unique value proposition, which is what unique value does this person provide to Blue Origin? And so it's not, again, it's not about you and like, oh, I really want to work in a cutting edge space industry organization. No, we're not going down that path. It's what unique value do you provide to this organization in this role that you will be accepting in the future? Connect the dots for them. Why are you the best fit for this role? What unique things do you have that other candidates don't that make you the best fit for this role?
They're getting lazier and lazier as we go into the future. It's like, not only is the question short, it's like, why Blue Origin? Pretty soon they're going to shorten that to just why. They look at you and they go, why? And then you just have to answer that, right?
Yep. No additional context. Why what?
Because. And they go, yeah, that's right.
Very deep.
You're hired. Yeah.
Get
this person a corner office.
Yep.
This is the next one, right? This Harsha says, "Hi, Abby. Your videos have been very helpful to structure my CV and prepare for interviews."
Yes. Yay. Yeah. Thank you.
I've been in processes, but have not been able to secure a contract. Keep your videos coming. Thanks. There's a vote of confidence.
Yes, it is. Thank you. And then their next comment is, I do make notes of specific points and practice out loud so that I hear myself. However, I tend to forget certain points during the think of action. How can I how can I overcome this? So I actually just made a video today that I'm in the process of editing where I'm talking about how to prepare for behavior-based interviews. And one of my tips is to use a generative AI platform, ChatGPT, Grok, etc., and have it analyze the job posting for the 10 core competencies to the job that you are interviewing for. So what are the competencies that are most critical to this job? Then you can prepare stories associated with those 10 competencies rather than trying to rack your brain in the moment for the hundreds or thousands or more experiences that you've had over the course of your life that could help you answer interview questions. So it's much easier to remember 10 things than it is to remember an infinite number of things. So what I recommend doing is in the preparation process, copy the job posting, paste it into generative AI, ask it to analyze the posting for the top 10 competencies associated with the position. And then based on what it generates for you, build stories and think of your experiences that are associated with each of those competencies. Then regardless of what question comes up during the interview process, it's likely that you can modify one of those 10 stories that you've already prepared and practiced to fit the answer for the question that they've asked you.
Absolutely. And I recommend something similar. That's the way to go. Don't try and come up with an arsenal of customized answers for every possible behavior question they could ask you. You'll never be able to. There's an infinite number of behavioral based questions. This is the only way that I know of to really handle that, is that you have, like Abby says, 10 pre-prepared stories. So 10 little anecdotes from your past in various different situations. So whatever they ask you, you're going to pull out one of the 10. So you'll always have an answer. You pick the story of yours that fits it the closest. And you might have to change a couple of little words here and there, but basically you'll always have an answer right on the tip of your mind, tip of your tongue, forefront of your mind, and you'll be okay.
And you think of it like a toolkit. There's many thousands of different tools out there, but the basic toolkit of 10 tools to get most jobs done, that's what you want to have prepared. And you can modify each of those individual tools based on which one you choose to pull out for which specific question that's posed to you. And chances are you'll be able to tweak it in some way, shape, or form to match the question they've actually asked you.
Yeah. What are some common tools, Abby, that are there's a lot of jobs that require them, like the ability to learn from your mistakes,
problem solve. Yep.
Yep.
So problem solving, communicate with other people, conflict resolution. Some of these are related, like
Like
customer
conflict
service.
with coworkers, conflict with the
Yep.
boss, right?
Yep.
It's good if you have one of each of those, something
Yep.
like that.
Or, like, so conflict. So it could be, 3 or 4 different situations. You could have conflict with your direct supervisor, conflict with someone that you're working laterally with,
Yeah.
conflict with someone who falls below you in the hierarchy, and then even conflict with a customer. And so there's lots of different ways you could go with conflict. Um, you know, Collaboration. So working in a team, communication falls into that too.
Yeah.
Miscommunication, which is also somewhat conflict resolution. I mentioned problem solving earlier. Leadership, maybe even people who are not formal leaders, like they don't have a title where they officially supervise people,
Yeah,
but
any big wins you've had, like you've done a really amazing accomplishment at your job. You were given a chance. Some project was like put in your charge, and you won with flying colors. You did a great job. You were commended by your boss. Like that would be a good story to be able to tell, like how you
yeah,
succeeded in doing something.
yeah. Flexibility and adaptability. Plans change all the time. So how do you pivot? And how have you pivoted successfully when you had, maybe one priority and then you had to pivot to a different priority or had to be flexible with your schedule? So there's lots of things that come up. And again, what I would recommend doing is you could probably use a generative AI platform to say, these are the types of jobs that I'm applying to. What are the top 10 soft skills that I should really focus on, being able to showcase during interviews? And it
Yeah,
will
that's great
generate
advice.
some ideas for you.
I think we're on this one. Amazed says, I recently started a new role about 2 months ago, but I'm beginning to realize it may not be the right fit.
Oh,
That's not good. How can I explain this to a recruiter during an interview without raising concerns? You might not want to explain that, because what that's going to say about you is that you're the type of person that takes a job and then has second thoughts.
mhm,
And
mhm,
if they start to see you as that's who you are, they're probably not going to want to hire you, because if they hire you, you might have second thoughts.
mhm.
So I'd keep that under your hat. I wouldn't disclose that. I don't know if
Yeah,
you can
willingly
disclose.
offering it up wouldn't work well.
Yeah, yeah. I
And
try to obfuscate that if that's the real reason.
yeah, and I recognize Amazed from previous live streams, so thanks for coming back. It's great to see you.
Yeah,
Um, and I think, yeah, proactively explaining that could harm you. If you have it listed on your or on your resume that you started 2 months ago, and they're like, "Why are you wanting to leave this job specifically?" Then I think you're kind of in a spot where you do have to answer it. You can't just avoid answering that question. And so, what I would do is talk about kind of the self awareness about it. So, I was really excited about this opportunity. It wasn't quite what I was expecting it to be. It sounds, you know, being in this position for 2 months, there was a miscommunication about what the role and responsibility really was. And so it's better for me and better for the organization for me to start looking for something new, something along those lines.
yeah, that's pretty good. That's probably one of the most benign things you can say.
Yeah.
There was a miscommunication. I was given to understand that this was the role, and it turns out it wasn't. The role is this whole other thing.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, it's really not, doesn't play to my interest, unfortunately, or my
So it's
skill.
not about your lack of commitment. And it's not even about the organization. It's about your self awareness that this job isn't the best fit. And so you're not giving up on you're not just quitting the organization, but you are, wanting to engage in opportunities that are probably a better fit for you. And then further down the line, being sure that and I don't think this is like a international thing, it's more US, but best practice is the 2 weeks notice. So if you get offered a new job, then saying I would like at least 2 weeks before my next start date so that I can give my current company some time to start to fill my position. Um,
Yeah,
and
I would also make sure that you're a little proactive in saying things, because you know by saying this, you never know what they might interpret or read into it. They might think like, okay, you're very finicky.
Mhm.
Things have to be exactly the way you're expecting it, or you get upset and you leave. Or you just can't tolerate a little variation in your role, which is reasonable. It comes up from time to time, whatever role we're in. Occasionally you're asked to do something that's sometimes a little bit outside of your role, technically speaking, but it's not unreasonable. So I would be proactive and I say, like, listen, I understand that, our roles are, to a degree, they're fluid. You sometimes do things that are a little bit outside of your strict role. You're asked to do things outside of them, and we have to be flexible, and I am. But this was a whole other level. This was like a completely different role, and that's going a little too far. So just I would address some of the common ways they could read something negative into your explanation and proactively address it. Say, this wasn't that,
Yeah.
like, I'm flexible, and I'm prepared to commit, but this was really far outside what is generally considered reasonable,
Yeah.
just to make sure that they can't take it the wrong way.
Yeah. And ideally, it doesn't come up. Ideally, there's no questions about your current position and why you're leaving or anything like that. And you can just skate over that. But if it does come up, shorter, to the point, and moving on about, your personal growth and development and what you can bring to this new role, focusing on that is going to be better in the long run.
Absolutely. We have.
So yeah, DK was the person who was talking about having their interview with Blue Origin next week.
Okay.
So their, passion is they want to take humanity to the stars. And then they also said that Blue
I want
Origin
to take humanity to the sun. That's the next thing. Yeah.
Burn. Okay.
Literally.
Said they reached out to me because I have 13 AI patents. So it sounds like this person was kind of headhunted by Blue Origin. And that makes it a little bit tougher to be like, well, like, you came to me. I didn't apply to Blue Origin. And so that's, again,
in that case, when they say, why Blue Origin, you say, good question.
Yeah. Why should I pick you?
Yeah. And the answer is,
yeah. Why?
Exactly.
Because
it's a little weird that if they headhunted you, they would ask you that question.
Yeah, and it's maybe even one of those reverse things where they're like, okay, we want you, but we want to make sure you want us too. Yep.
Reverse thing.
Games.
Yeah. Mind games. Mind games, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to that, if they ask why Blue Origin, well, then you can agree that you want to take humanity to the stars. And then you also emphasize the unique value that you bring to Blue Origin through these 13 AI patents and other things that you've done that set you apart from other people who could be competing for the same job.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think we've got to the end of the chat. So that's always good. So get in the chat. So if you guys have questions, anything to do with careers, job interviews, job search, resumes, posted jobs, hidden jobs, networking, all that kind of stuff, negotiation, offers, you want to quit your job, whatever, we're here to help. So get in the chat wherever you're watching this from, and we will do our best to help you out.
Yeah.
Here we go. Danielle Jones says, how to answer, describe your worst job. These are like these negativity questions. They think they're so clever for asking these. You see, they're trying to get the dirt on you. It's all like, you're going to present like a sort of sales pitch about like how you're the greatest person that's ever lived, right? And they're not completely stupid. They realize that, like, that's probably not true. You probably have some things in your past that aren't perfect. And this is one of the laziest ways of trying to get you to just tell them, everything bad about you. Is they say, like, so tell me about the worst job you've had. Tell me about your worst trait. Tell me about your biggest weakness, right? Like those type of questions. So
it's a trap.
Yeah, it's a balancing act to like answer these things.
Yes. And when it comes to answering these types of questions, they are trying to set you up to hear the negative things. And so I'm trying to understand if this is like, describe the worst job you've ever held, or describe a job that is you would never want to work in.
Just break down and cry and say, I'm a terrible person. It was a terrible job.
Yes. And so what I would do if I were posed this question during an interview is try to flip it to be more positive. So, some of my strengths are this. And so I really struggle in a situation where there might be, lack of communication in an organization. So here's what I would do if I were in that situation to ensure that I have the communication needed for me to be effective. So you kind of flip it to talk more about your strengths and how you might handle that type of situation, but not necessarily go into the details about the worst job you've ever held or what would make a job the worst job ever. It's being more like, I recognize that there are potential negative aspects of every job, and here's what I would do if I was faced with that type of situation.
I recognize that there are potential negative aspects to every job, but that job sucked.
No one would want to do
Yeah, I would go one step beyond. I wouldn't even take this bait, okay, because they're not asking about you directly. They're asking you about some intermediary thing. In this case, it's your job. So I would, if I was asked this, I would start my answer by saying, well, I mean, of the jobs I've had, it's hard to determine which one was the worst. I mean, they were all pretty good for me. I didn't really have any issues with any job that I've ever held. And then in order to try and give them something, because you can't really end it there and like you're kind of refusing to answer the question. So you got to give them something. So you'd say like, well, okay, so my second last job, I don't know if it was the worst, but it was the one where, in terms of continuing your career, it was a bit of a sort of tangent. It went off and I did that for a bit. Then it kind of came back. So I don't know if that means it's the worst, and then you talk about that job, right? So it's like you're answering the question, but you're not giving them anything really negative. You're not saying, oh, they're all a bunch of jackasses. And, my boss was an alcoholic. And you know what I really learned there? I really learned, how to spot bullies. So I'm always looking for bullies, you know what I'm saying? You don't want to give them negative things about you, right? They're trying to bait you into giving them all kinds of things that they can then use to eliminate you, right?
Yeah,
So don't take the bait,
Yep.
is what I would do.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good question, because there's also some other like random questions that could come up. So Bill, one time I was asked in an interview, how would you describe the color red to someone who can't see?
I do very badly on questions like that because I'm a very technical person, very fact, not intuitive, not abstract, very concrete. So I'm useless at that kind of stuff. It's like,
Yeah.
well, it's a color. You could say it's a color, that sounds very rough, or very sort of, very warm, kind of thing. I mean, I don't know. Is there a right answer to that?
No, I don't think so. And the way I answered it was like describing the feelings associated with the color
It's like
red.
a warm hug.
It could be anything from like love to fury. So like there's a spectrum of like what it could be. One of the other
try to imagine like all the animals from Disney movies in the background, like all the chipmunks and stuff, the birds, right?
Well, and one of the other questions so I ended up getting that job, not because of my answer to that question, I don't think. But
so you need to tell everyone what the answer is, so then they can say that and then like get hired.
Yes. Well, and
I would have failed.
There's some answers that are red flags. No, not because it's the color red, but truly are red flags. And my boss, who asked that question, would also sometimes ask in interviews, if you could be any type of insect, what would you be and why?
The friendly insect. Yeah. That's what I do.
There was one time where someone's answer to that actually got them rejected from the job. They said they wanted to be a praying mantis because they hated all the men in their lives, and they praying mantises to men. I was like, okay,
well, that's probably not a good thing to say.
You want to kind of stay away from that sort of thing. And
the color red, it reminds me of blood, which reminds me of murder, which reminds me of hippies. God, I hate hippies. What was the question again? Don't say stuff like that.
As a matter of fact, I listen to true crime and I'm obsessed with serial killers. Like maybe not that tangent yet. But when it comes to answering those kind of like left field questions that blindside you, I think the intention with those types of questions is to really see how you think on your feet. If you like completely freeze, if you stick your foot in your mouth and you say things that indicate that you definitely aren't the right fit for the role because you have this hatred towards the other gender. So there's
that's what I was going to ask. Like what is the purpose of a question like that? And how would you, are they fishing for something, or it's just as long as you don't say anything negative about any one person or any one group, you pass. Is that how that works?
I
What's
mean,
the point?
honestly, I think it's truly how you work under pressure, because it is a question that there's really no right answer to until you put your foot in your mouth. But even that is subjective. Like, you might
Yeah.
have someone on the other side of the table who's like, I completely agree. I would also be a praying mantis. So it, I think, depends. In most cases, I would say the point of those types of questions is to really throw you off and see how you function under pressure. And
Ah,
I'm trying to think, back to that job in that interview, there were not a lot of moments where you needed to really like think quickly on your feet and like deal with that type of random thing coming out of left field. So I'm not quite sure the purpose of the question other than just to be silly in the interview process. But those types of questions do come up and they do exist. And I think there's like a super common one from Google, which is like describing why manholes are round.
yeah,
Um,
that's kind of a cliche. I mean, I've heard so much high level BS from a lot of tech companies. They have these, whether it's Steve Ballmer at Microsoft or all these people from Apple, Google, whatever, and they think they're so clever by asking these high level level 9 kind of questions and stuff, and then they give you this amateur psychologist theory about what it reveals about the person. And I've never heard personally, hey, I've never heard so much crap in my life. That's my opinion. Now other people are really into that stuff, and chances are, if you're a job seeker and you're applying to places, you're going to be meeting all kinds of people at a lot of different organizations, and some of them might be into that stuff,
yeah.
and so you might get some pretty weird job interview questions thrown your way. And the problem is, I feel that it's unfair because people, when they go to interviews, it's not like they're on the job. They're much more uncomfortable. There's high stakes involved. There's they're at a point, if they're between jobs, where their self confidence is at an all time low, and they're enduring a ton of rejection right at that moment. You're really not at your best, and then you're going to take someone and you're going to ask them some kind of off the wall question, but yet the stakes are very high. I just think it's not really a respectful thing to do. I think a lot of people get upset when they get asked that kind of thing because they
Yeah.
don't understand it.
Well, and I just had this conversation with a client earlier this week. Well, I guess it's Monday, so maybe it was last week. When it was talking about like interviews are actually one of the fakest things we could be involved with.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah,
No other setting where you are kind of in this type of situation, except for maybe a sales pitch.
yep,
And I guess that's pretty common. Like, there's lots of sales jobs out there, but it's just such a fabricated environment.
absolutely.
You might not even have things that are accurate on your resume. The stories you might be telling might not even be true. The way that the employers are presenting themselves could be fake, because maybe they have a terrible culture and they're just pretending like everything is good. So it's so fabricated that it makes this
Absolutely.
process
Yep.
stressful. And it's unfortunate, because I don't really know the answer to how to make it more realistic, other than, having a trial period where you don't really interview anyone and you just have people come in and do the job for a week to a month.
I mean, I agree with you. If you're not a lawyer and you're not a salesperson, this will be the most artificial exchange you will ever have in your life.
Yeah.
That's the reality. And it doesn't help, in my opinion, that recruiters in general, and hiring managers, they don't leave these cliched standard job interview questions in the past. They don't move on to new things. Instead, they ask the same old questions. Now, we each have YouTube channels where we tell people how to answer job interview questions. Like, when they ask this, you say this. It's very fake.
Yeah.
Very strategic. And the only problem is that it's just common knowledge. It's public knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
You're expecting them to ask this, and you've prepared for it, and you give a canned answer to it, and they recognize a lot of canned answers. You know what I mean? It's just very, very artificial. one thing that helps is if you're talking to a hiring manager or someone, or even recruiters, where they're not just confining themselves to these like cliched standard job interview questions. You're actually having more of a free flowing conversation
Yes.
by not reading questions off a sheet, and just having a free flowing question. And I understand that, especially in larger organizations, they are pursuing this thing where you want to put all the candidates side by side. So you want to be able to ask exactly the same questions and compare their answers side by side. But like, I understand that, but I do think that despite that, it still doesn't make any sense. It would still be superior to have a more organic conversation.
Yeah.
There's definitely some disadvantages to that, but there's a lot of advantages to that. And I think in that case, the pros outweigh the cons.
Yes. And there's, when it comes to interviewing, the proverbial they are trying to standardize the process. And the only way to do that is to ask the same set of questions in every interview to each person. And even just the process of standardizing adds this sense of rigidity and lack of flexibility.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so that then confines the interviewers to this like mindset that they have this specific set of time that they have to get these specific questions answered. And then they have to like grade people on a rubric, which is also standard.
Yep.
And it just really dehumanizes the whole process.
Yeah.
And what they're trying to stay away from is those biases that, people are deciding to just hire their friends because that's who they know and that's who they're comfortable with. But, really what it comes down to is if you could just sit down with someone who meets minimum qualifications for a job and just talk to them person to person without being worried about them suing you or whatever might be going on, chances are you'll probably find someone who's a better fit quicker. If you
absolutely, yeah. I mean, for a start, the whole standardization thing means that you can never ask a question that's based on, like, it's tailored to a candidate in any way.
Yeah.
No matter what they say, you always have to ask the same things, right? Yeah. What's usually more fruitful is if you have a conversation with somebody, you maybe start out from the same point. Maybe you ask them about what they've done. Like that was the old kind of idiot's guide to doing a job interview. If you don't know anything about anything, you never conducted a job interview before, just put the candidate's resume on the table in front of you and then just ask them questions about it. Oh, I see you've done this. What's the deal with that? Why did you do that? What did you learn there? Like this kind of stuff. But by definition, those questions are tailored to the individual. So if they give you an answer, you could say, for example, oh, why did you do that? Why do you say that? I mean, it's all tailored to that individual. If you're doing it on a rubric, by definition, you can't ever follow up with anything. One level is as deep as you go, Yep. So, it's just, but this is a known thing. And I think this is a barrier to people. How fake these interactions are, they're a hindrance, not a help in being able to really, for both parties, you would want the company to want to see that employee, get to know them a little bit better. And the fact that you can't deviate your questions or, have a conversation with them, I mean, it totally works against you. So
yeah, it makes the whole process feel more robotic.
Yeah, not to go on a rant or anything.
Yes. Which actually kind of leads us to Christian's next question, which came into the chat, which said, how do you prepare for the unexpected? Questions out of left field, realizing there will be more than one person who will interview you, etc.
Make sure you can bench press at least 1,400 pounds and then wear a cape to the interview. You'll be prepared for anything, let me tell you.
Yep.
Except in the U.S. where people could have guns. So I'm not sure.
So safety first.
A bulletproof vest under the cape.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Get that special backpack.
Did we answer that with sufficient helpfulness?
I don't. I think one of them, like when it comes to expecting the unexpected or preparing for the unexpected, is knowing that you can't prepare for everything. And so that there might be a moment where you need to just take a deep breath and a pause before you respond. So questions out of left field. Take a moment just to quickly try to analyze the question and see like what the point of this question is. So going back to those examples that I gave earlier, how would you describe the color red to someone who can't see? What type of insect would you be and why? Like those really have no correlation to the actual position that's being interviewed for.
I'm going to try and remember your answers for both of those, Abby. I would have not have done well for both of those questions.
Yes. Or let's say that you walk into the interview and there's suddenly 5 people sitting in front of you rather than the one person you were expecting. That both of those things, questions out of left field and there being more than the person you were expecting in the interview, are things that you cannot control. So what are the things that you can control? Well, you control what you say. You can control how you say it. You can control how fast you speak. You can control how you introduce yourself to those people. You can control, like there's lots of things that are within your control, and focusing on those things that you do control feels much more empowering and ultimately will help you build confidence if you kind of practice that mindset more often. And Bill, you might roll your eyes, but I'm going to put a link in the chat to 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
I never roll my eyes. Hey, it's all good.
Yeah. But this is my most favorite book that I recommend when it comes to like personal development that really also applies to professional environments. It's by Stephen Covey. And, it's called Your Circle of Influence. What sorts of things do you have influence over that might concern you, but you can do something about it? And so I would highly recommend, if you haven't already read this book or listened to the audiobook, I feel like the audiobook is probably easier to digest. I'd recommend doing that. I'm going to put it in the chat. It's a link to my Amazon storefront. And so read that, listen to it. If you feel like you have any of these barriers that are like kind of holding you back mentally from succeeding in these types of challenging situations, and many times it has to do with focusing on the things that you cannot control rather than the things that you can control.
So what I would say to this is I just want to reiterate kind of what I already said earlier about practice interviews. Like the more you practice, 2 things, the better you will get, and also the more confident you will be. Okay. So if you have the money, practice with a career coach. Okay. This is what they do. They're professionals. They're experts. Abby's a career coach, so she can help you. You could do a lot of sessions with her, or you could do 1 session with her just as a sanity check, get her objective opinion of how you're doing in a pretend interview with her. Now, for most people, okay, once again, what I recommend is grabbing a friend or a family member. These people might not be geniuses, okay? They might not be, HR professionals or whatever. You might not, you can probably barely tolerate them in a lot of cases, but, they're around. They're not doing anything with their lives. So you might as well get them to help you with yours because you're going places, right? Get them to pretend to be an interviewer and to interview you as a practice thing. They can make up the questions themselves, or they can go on the internet and find some questions, or you could give them a list of questions, whatever, and practice interviewing with them. It's a completely different thing than you practicing by yourself, just, memorizing answers to yourself. Okay. This is a whole other level of practice, right? Where you practice with someone. It's going to feel awkward. It's going to feel weird, and that's good. Okay. So if you do that enough times, as I said earlier in the chat today, 3 to 4 times a day, 3 to 4 interviews a day, maybe with different people even, for 2 weeks, like Monday to Friday. So that's like 30 to 40 interviews. You do that. First of all, you'll know every question backwards, forwards. You've heard it so many times. And then you'll have a lot more confidence in your ability to do an interview, because when you go down to an actual job interview, they're asking you the same stuff as what you rehearsed for the most part. Okay. So you can do that. And then if you want to go like above and beyond, you can prepare like contingency answers when you don't really know the question, the answer to the exact question that they asked you, but it's sort of like a fallback answer. Okay. Now, what I'd recommend is the most common one of these is, the job posting, the requirements section where it says we're looking for someone with this, right? First of all, print a hard copy of that out, take it to your interview, put it on the table or whatever. If you're physically going to, a company, or if you're doing like, a Zoom call or whatever, like have it like just nearby so you can see it, and highlight the requirements. Okay. So you can just glance at it. It pops out. And when you don't know what to say, a good fallback answer is to just remind them that you have the first thing that they're looking for, the second thing, the third thing. Even if you don't have it 100%, they want 5 years experience, but you only have 2 years, something like that. But speak to it. Say like, well, I have this, how would I handle that? Well, I'd rely on the fact that I have this education that you're wanting, that's seen me through, whatever. Get some contingency answers, some fallback answers. And between all this stuff, no matter what the hell happens when you go to the interview, you're probably going to be fine. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's covering your bases quite well, I think.
Yep.
There you go.
And sometimes they're just trying to throw you off just to see how you respond. So being calm, cool, and collected about it is going to be your best way to move forward. Even if you feel like you're stumbling, even if you're not quite sure if what you're saying is what they're looking for, take a deep breath and push forward.
Yeah, throw it back at them too, say, so how am I doing? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right? Did I answer your question?
Seriously, those are good. That works too.
Yeah.
The next comment is from DK. So they said they interviewed last time 12 years ago. A lot has changed. Standardized questions now versus custom candidate specific in the past.
A lot has changed for posted jobs. Yes. But not for networking. You can always go around, and most people do. Anyway.
Yep. And I would say if you are applying to posted jobs, it sounds like with the last position, you maybe were headhunted and they found you, which is great. But if you are actively applying to jobs that are posted, then expect more standardized process. That's where the content that Bill and I put out can be really helpful in helping you prepare, because it's so standardized, it's predictable. Most of the videos that we have, about how to answer, tell me about yourself, like that's the most common interview question, how to answer behavior-based interview questions, all of those things. While the specific context might change, the overall advice doesn't. So because it's been so standardized, there's kind of cheat sheets out there to help you be successful in those more standardized settings.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say something. I need to get like a bell or a chime or something. When I'm about to say something controversial, I can just ding like that. Okay, so yeah, so DK, we made an assumption earlier. I think Abby technically was the one that did it, that you're being headhunted because you've got patents for AI and all this kind of stuff you were sharing with us before. If that's the case, okay, honestly, I don't see why you would be applying for posted jobs. That's my opinion. You should just be reaching out to companies you want to work with, learn how to do that. If you don't know, I have a course that talks about it, but one way or another, learn how to do that if you're not already doing it. And just that should be really the meat and potatoes of all you need to do to find your next kick-ass position. You know what I mean? Like if you're in demand, you got some serious skills, your people see your value immediately. That will really open doors for you. That's where all the good positions are. You know what I mean? They're not hiring strangers for those positions. They're going to the best. You know what I mean? So I would exclusively look there if I were in your shoes and our assumptions about you were correct.
Yep. I would agree.
Okay, where were we here?
Looks like Christian had another question. Is it okay to put relevant college courses on the resume for the job, even if they don't require it? Yes, with the caveat that it's recent. So, for example, if you have graduated from college and it's been more than 3 years since your graduation, I usually recommend that you do not include your graduation date. And kind of along those same lines, including those college courses, unless they are like explicitly related to the job that you're applying to,
yes,
probably don't want to include. So if it's within 3 years of you graduating, then include the college courses that are relevant. If it's been more than 3 years, unless they say specifically you need theoretical coursework in X, Y, and Z, then you may not need to list that. If you feel like it could set you apart from other candidates, list it. It just may not give you an additional advantage, and it takes up valuable real estate on your resume that could be used in different ways.
Absolutely. I agree with that. V Cynical says, any tips for interviewing in front of a panel, such as interviewing for an apprenticeship for the union? Panel interviews, it's exactly this. In my opinion, it's exactly the same as talking to somebody one-on-one. Just that the questions are going to come from like 5 people instead of 1 person. The only added complication is that you got 5 people there to learn their names and to learn who the hell they are, because it really helps knowing who the person is. Like if there's 4 people and you know, okay, that person is the CEO, that person is the recruiter, that person is like the hiring manager, that they're going to be your boss if you get this, and that person is some kind of weird outside consultant, who's not super familiar with the company. They don't work there, right? But they're advising the CEO or something on like who they should hire. It helps knowing like who the people are. So if they ask you a question, you can kind of speak to their concerns. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So if you're talking with a panel, the advice I always give on this is if you have a business card, print up a business card for like the equivalent of $20. Just take, if you're on LinkedIn, take the header of your LinkedIn profile, essentially, put it on a business card. And then when you get in the room, you take out your card. Like I got a pocket here. You take out your card, you give it to these people. They'll give you their cards, right? If this is a physical interview. And then you could put those on the table in front of you so you could remember their names and who the hell they are. And that helps in a panel interview.
And if for some reason you don't have business cards, I know they're starting to go away. They're not as popular now. What I would recommend doing is always, if you're in an in-person interview, bring like a Padfolio or a notebook and open it up to a blank piece of paper or your page that has some notes on it and jot in order where people are sitting, what their name is and what they do. Now, it's possible that at the very beginning, they just introduce themselves and just say their names. It's okay to ask some additional follow-up questions. Like if they just start off and say, my name is Abby, and then the next person's, my name is Bill. Say, thank you all of you
Hi,
for
Bill. Yeah.
names. Yes. Then saying, before we begin, could you give me a little bit more insight on, what you do for the organization? Then they might go into deeper detail, like my name is Abby and I'm the recruiter for this position. My name is Bill and I'm the CEO of this company. They then can give you some of those additional comments about their position and the organization and how they fit into this and why they're in the room. As a recruiter in the past, I'm not currently a recruiter, but in the past, what I would like to do if I knew that it was going to be a panel interview is I would list who was going to be in the interview and I would list their position. So if someone was interviewing for a role, I would say, Abby will be in this, recruiter, Sarah will be in this, HR manager, Jack will be in this, hiring manager, whatever that might be. So it gives a little bit of context, but that doesn't always happen. So I've also put in the chat my most recent video on panel interviews and what to expect when it comes to panel interviews. But what Bill said earlier is essentially the same, I guess, advice and information, which is there's not much difference between a one-on-one interview and a panel interview. You should be showing up and be behaving in a very similar way.
And I'll give you bonus points if you can cause a fight to break out among the panel while they're interviewing you. Yeah. That's when you take it to a whole new level. No, it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same situation. They're just questions are coming from different people instead of one person. And it's the same in every other respect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Don't be intimidated. Okay. Don't you got like, you might, I don't know. I don't want to psych you out, but you might have like 4 or 5 people staring at you. It's okay. Don't worry about it. It's just like you're talking to one person. Right. And just remember, some of these people are kind of clueless, right? They were asked to be in the interview. They don't really know the job very well. They don't know job interviews. Yeah. So,
yeah. And one of the things that I've found when it comes to people who are inexperienced interviewers, not interviewees, but interviewers, is that they are going to really rely on that list of questions they've been given. And what will probably happen is you'll see that the person who's more experienced with interviewing will be in tune with what you're saying. They'll be looking at you, they'll be nodding, they'll be listening. They might jot a couple of notes down. But the people who are more inexperienced with interviewing will be eyes down on their piece of paper, scribbling notes as quickly as they can and not really paying any attention to you, just listening to what you're saying. So that's just something to keep in mind when it comes to panel interviews is there will be people who are more comfortable with the interview process and there will be people who are less comfortable with the interview process. And those who are less comfortable will be really focused on the resources they have.
V Cynical also says, what are some little things that people don't think about but make them stand out to the hiring manager? it's all about your attitude. Like, listen, your application was about your technical qualifications for the role. The whole point of like being face to face with you, or at least at the end of a camera with you, is to see what you're like as a person. So just go in there, be friendly, be agreeable, be what's the word?
You kind of want to read the room. You want to
Yeah,
mirror how
it's
the other
positive.
person is showing up. If they're very professional, kind of by the book, they, are not as like friendly and like comfortable, then you want to keep it relatively professional and locked in as well. But if they're like making some jokes with you and smiling and laughing, you don't want to be completely stuck in that robotic mode. You want
Yeah,
to try to build
people work with who they like. People hire who they like. Who's like, especially the hiring manager. I mean, whoever you hire, you now have to work with that person every single day, right? So you're not going to pick someone that's, on paper they're a genius, but in real life you guys don't get along. When they say something to you, you misinterpret it. When you say something to them, they misinterpret it. When they say something, you get offended. When you say something, they get offended. Like that's not the person they're going to pick. They're going to pick the person that is easygoing, is helpful. They want to help out. They're friendly. They have a certain passion for the role. They want to be there. They're excited to work with you. That's the person that they hire, right? All things being equal. So you go in there and you be that person, and that's all you can do.
Yep. I think we have time for one last question, which came through from George.
Okay.
How do I recover when I realized I flopped in the second technical question and I sense the interviewer seems to have made up his mind, and I feel the tension building up? It's a good question. What do you think, Bill?
Okay, listen. Now, understanding that your options might be limited here and being able to salvage the situation, you could, one option is to address it directly and say, like, listen, I have been preoccupied. I've been thinking about that last question you asked, and I feel that I perhaps didn't give as good of an answer as I normally could have done. Would we be able to revisit that? Would that be okay? Or something like that. Like, you could try and directly address it.
Mm-hmm.
It might be possible to just move forward and make up for it, in some way. If you know what I got to read this exact question here. You flopped in a technical question. Okay, I feel the tension building up.
So it's kind of like the interviewer has decided, based on their answer to the second question, I'm going to just go through the motions to finish this interview, but they're out of the running.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes you can't recover from it.
Yeah.
I would say if you realize this and you also recognize that what you could have said instead that would work out more in your favor, I think it's perfectly acceptable to say, like, I'm processing what I said for the second question you asked me. And if it's all right, I would like to come back to that one, because now that I've had some time to digest it, I actually think my response may be different. Something like that.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
The other thing you could do is just push through the interview and then send a follow-up email, kind of clarifying your process or how you would respond to that situation in the future differently. But there might not be anything you can do. The best thing you can do is try to put it out of your mind, try to redeem yourself with future questions. If you feel like it truly is holding you back and is the decision maker, then coming back to it in the moment is probably the best fit.
And I just want to respond to this thing here from Ara said that. Absolutely. They're quoting something I said, I believe. And yeah, absolutely. This is kind of how it works. I mean, I meant it in a good way. It's like, it doesn't matter who you are. You go in there and you're friendly, you're agreeable, you're approachable, you're helpful, and you make an effort to try and click with them and be positive and, be a little excited about the role. And, internally, you're probably nervous. You probably hate it. You're out of your comfort zone. You're not on your turf. You're dealing with strangers. It's not your idea of a good time, but you put on a brave face. You try to be pleasant and friendly, and that can smooth over like a lot of weaknesses, perhaps, in that maybe you're not the most experienced candidate. Maybe you're not the most educated candidate. You know what I mean? Like, You know what I'm saying? It really is a great leveler of the
Yes.
playing field. Just your attitude, because you get a lot of brilliant people coming to job interviews that are technically they've got a lot of experience and skills and education, but they get in there and they're argumentative, they're finicky, they're kind of a little annoyed. It just doesn't click with people.
Yeah.
And it's because they're not putting any effort into that. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So I meant this in a good way. If I don't care who you are, if you can just adopt some of these good traits, at least for the duration of the interview, that can go a long way to help you. So that's what I want to say about that.
Yes. And essentially, it's reading the room. If I am someone who is very by the book, I really like process and policy and procedure, and I'm all about the technical details. And I'm interviewing someone who's very whimsical and creative and, does all the things, like that's also not going to work, because I'm not going to like that this person is way opposite of what I am. And that's just goes back to what we talked about from the very beginning, which is interviews are so subjective, even though they try to standardize it. So it really comes down to how you connect with the interviewer, in addition to the skills that you have to do the job.
That's pretty. I can't help myself. I'm just going to say something very
One
briefly
last
about this.
question. Yeah.
Uh, okay, the bias of having a tattoo or a nose ring is not hireable. We should find ourselves. No, it doesn't mean you're not hireable, but it does mean that you're just not a fit, right? If you want to work at a bank and you've got a face tattoo and like a 3-inch nose ring, it's just not going to work, for most employers. If you want to work, at a bar, you want to be at a bouncer at a biker bar or something like that. Hey, that's probably a requirement. You know what I mean? So it just is based on fit. Everything is based on fit. How you dress, how you look, your grooming.
Your age.
Everything is. You just have to play the part. You know what I mean? Because it does say something about you, who you are. Right? Rightly or wrongly, you're giving off signals, and in a job interview, you may have to manage what signals you're giving off.
Yep.
Just how it goes.
And I worked with someone who had full sleeve tattoos and even some tattoos up onto their neck. And I actually didn't know they had tattoos for the first year that I worked with them, because they intentionally wore long sleeves with high collars. And I think that, if reflecting back on the hiring team for that specific job, if that person had come as they are with their tattoos showing, it would have turned off the hiring managers. They were older. It was a more like conservative situation. It was like a feeling of being more professional. And I think that all of those like stereotypes play against you when you don't cover those sorts of things, which is unfortunate. And at the same time, it's the reality of our world. Humans will
Absolutely.
make assumptions and judgments about what they see before they understand and know the full story. So do what you can to set yourself up for the most success during the interview process, even if that means overdressing and, taking your nose ring out or whatever that might be. If it could prevent you from getting the job and it's within your control to cover. And
Yeah.
at the same time, if covering or removing your nose ring or whatever that is such a like deviation from who you are, then the job and the situation that the job is in is probably not the best fit for you.
Yeah.
Why would you willingly put yourself in a situation where you're going to be constantly judged for who you are? It just doesn't seem like that would be a good fit.
Absolutely. That's just human nature. So learn about it. You can be who you want. And I actually like people with an edge. I like people that have something weird about them. I think they actually make the best employees, where you're working with a bunch of people and like each person has got some weird hobby or they have some weird thing, I think that gives them, and I mean, it's not a matter of thinking. I've seen how that gives them unique insights into stuff,
Absolutely. And we should
rather than
really,
always getting a plain vanilla person that's as boring as they
yeah.
come. You know what I
And
mean?
we should always hire people who are different from us, because it's going to push us to think outside of the box and innovate and be creative. But people in business want to do what's best for the business, which makes
Yeah.
us scared to deviate from the standard.
Yeah, like it's all cosmetic. We all know it's all cosmetic. It's not any kind of statement of who you are or what your capabilities are. But the reality is in some businesses, if you show up with tattoos and piercings and whatever, it's like the real litmus test is how do the customers feel when they see somebody at the company, in that attire, like you know
Absolutely.
what I mean? And if it's a turnoff for the customers, then it's just not going to fly. Usually for the employer, not because the employer is imposing some weird standard on people. It's because they're in the business of making money. They have to make customers happy, and if this is not what customers are into, then you know what I mean? It just doesn't support what they're trying to do. So the
Absolutely.
best is where you have that stuff. I think it's awesome that you have that stuff, but you're able to sort of cover up when you need to, when you're trying to make a first impression or something, you work at the bank, you're trying to close a big deal or something like that. Anyway, we have to jet. Actually, I'd love to stay here and rant about this stuff all afternoon, but
Yes.
we have to take off. Thank you to everybody who has participated, asked questions. We got some great questions, really awesome. I had a great time today, and we will be back. We haven't actually discussed when we're going to be back. I
I
think.
just looked at the calendar. I think
Yeah.
our next scheduled time to be back is July 7th, with the
Okay.
two of us. But Bill may stream Career Expert Roundtable as well before that because I'll be out of town and unable to join on my computer. But come back on July 7th for sure. Bill and I
Yes.
will be streaming together. If you are joining this from my channels, Bill has lots of live streams that he does each week, provides lots of great information on topics like this and then other topics like entrepreneurship and kind of the darker side of organizations, things like that, which can be fun. So yeah, check out Bill's channel if you're coming from my side of the world. And
And
yeah,
check out Abby's channel if you're looking for a career coach. If you're watching this on my channel, I don't I don't work with people one on one for like career type stuff. So if you're looking for that, if that is something that you feel you need someone to work one on one with you to give you the confidence, give you the sort of very specific pointers that are tailored to you. Check out Abby's YouTube channel and check out some of the services that she offers as a career coach that can work with you one on one and get you that kind of stuff if you're looking for that. We'll be back on July the 7th. Until then, thanks everyone. You guys are awesome, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
bye everyone.